Welcome to the Genealogy Gems podcast, providing quick and innovative ways to make the absolute most out of your research time and creative ideas for sharing and displaying your family history. I'm your host, Lisa Louise Cook. Hello and welcome to Genealogy Gems podcast episode number 137. I am even more excited than usual to bring this episode to you because it's about one of my favorite subjects, home cooking. Author Gena Philibert Ortega is here to talk about her new book. It's called From the Family Kitchen, Discover Your Food Heritage and Preserve Favorite Recipes. Now, who doesn't love yummy home cooking? And there's a lot to be learned about our ancestors, and in particular, those elusive female ancestors, through a study of our culinary history. So we're going to be talking about those invaluable genealogical records that are so often overlooked, and ways that you could really dig into your fabulous food family history as well. And I'm even going to be sharing a recipe with you and an old-fashioned utensil that our grandmothers used and that you can still use today to make scrumptious treats for your family. Oh, this is going to be so much fun. I can't wait. But first, let's cruise through the genealogy news. Lots of new things going on around here. First up, speaking of grandmas, I finally found my awesome grandma in California in the 1940 census. Yay! It was a snap, of course, because the California Index, along with several other states, was released on July 13th, 2012 by Ancestry. Now, Grandma and Grandpa were just 3 months away from moving into their first real home. They were in the process of building it when the census was taken. So at that time, they were actually in an apartment. So I've got a new address to map in Google Earth. And they were also just 3 months away from the birth of their first child, who was my mom. And since my other set of grandparents and my aunts and my uncles and everybody else was pretty much all living in California in 1940, you can imagine I didn't get much else done on July 13th because I spent the whole day scouring through the California Index. You know, it is such an amazing time to be a genealogist. You know, it wasn't that long ago that we had to go to the library. We had to pull the big old census index book off the shelf, locate possible names, cross-reference those to the right pages. Then we had to figure out which microfilm roll that the area was on and pull the microfilm roll and scroll through all the images. I probably pulled the records of a dozen families that day in the time that it would have taken me to probably just find one, the old way. So you gotta love it. And at Family Search, they are continuing to add new records to their free familysearch.org website. Of course, that continues to make our life a lot easier. They just announced that they've added the 1881 and the 1891 Scotland census indexes and millions more records for Brazil, China, Ecuador, Ireland, Italy, Portugal, Spain, and a few other countries. So if you haven't visited the site in a while, this might be a good time to go check in. And of course, something new around here is the new Lisa Louise Cook's Genealogy Gems website. We've got an entirely new website for you. And thanks again to all of you who have been writing in about it. I think it's unanimous. It needed to be updated. And yes, thankfully, it seems to be unanimous that you love it. So that is really awesome. That's what we were shooting for. And I know we've had some hiccups along the way getting that premium feed switched over, but that is up and running now. And let me remind you, premium members, you're now getting all 88 premium episodes that have been published to date when you are signed in on the website as a member and coming through your iTunes podcast feed. So in the past, of course, when you became a premium member, you got the 6 most recent episodes and then each new one was added each month. But now you have a wealth of episodes available to you at any time. I can't tell you how thrilled I have been to be able to make that content available to you premium members because it's something I've wanted to do for a long time, but the old website just couldn't handle it. So premium membership is now a huge value. Same price, at least for now, for keeping it at $29.95. You get a whole year's access to all of those great episodes. And of course, as we said before, sometimes you don't need that information the second it comes out, or sometimes you need it, a couple months later. This way you can go into the catalog and grab the topics that you need and just go back and listen again. So many of you have told me that just taking a second listen, you pick up new gems. So that's terrific. And now when I sent out the last newsletter and I announced the increase of content, Donna wrote in. She says here, my question is, how do I access the early premium episodes? I always listen to Genealogy Gems in premium via iTunes. Well, all you have to do is to sign into your premium membership on the website. And from the menu, you go to premium episodes, the premium episodes page. And there you'll find all the instructions step by step for updating your premium podcast feed. The important thing to remember is to delete the current premium feed that you have now in iTunes. That one's not being updated anymore. And do that first, and then go through the instructions and add the new feed. It just takes a minute or so. And that new feed, of course, it'll download all the 88 episodes that are currently up there right now. And then it's going to continue to bring you the new ones as we get those published. So it's a pretty easy transition, and it looks like everything is working smoothly. If you have a glitch, sometimes iTunes just acts up. As I've said before, it doesn't formally support premium podcast feeds. You can always try and close it. You can even reboot your computer and then open up iTunes and do it again. And sometimes, I don't know why, that fixes it. And Mike, he wrote in to say the new website looks great. Having recently redesigned one at work, I know how much time it can take. Yes, it took much longer than I thought it would. He says, I particularly appreciate the back catalog of premium podcasts, and I've started listening to them. And I hope that your video on hard drive organization will finally motivate me to get electronically organized. Keep up the great work. Well, thank you very, very much, Mike. I appreciate it. I am really glad that you're happy with it. That's our goal. And I am really tickled that the new site was Randy Seaver's Tuesday tip on July 10th, 2012, on his wonderful Genia Musings blog. You'll find that at geniamusings.com. I will have a link directly to his Tuesday tip featuring Lisa Louise Cook's Genealogy Gems website, the new revamp. So a big thank you to Randy for that shout out. Really appreciate it. And I want to follow up on life after iGoogle. In Genealogy Gems podcast episode number 136, I gave you a neat solution to the demise of iGoogle. So, as you know, Google has announced it's going to be discontinuing iGoogle, which is, of course, is the way that you can customize the Google homepage just for you. And, of course, here on the podcast, we've talked a lot about how to customize it specifically for genealogy research, which makes it even better. Now, while it's not going to go away until later, I think it's November of 2013, there's no time like the present to make a switch, and NetVibes.com is a great alternative. So in our last episode, number 136, I talked to you about a special process for converting your tabs and your RSS feeds from iGoogle to your new free NetVibes account to get you started in the transition. And I also published a video, which you found over at the Genealogy Gems YouTube channel, and that shows you how to do this step by step. Well, I've heard from many of you that really love the NetVibes solution. One listener wrote, "Thanks for saving our iGoogle pages. I'm going to go to work on your solution." And Lee wrote, "Looking forward to your help in converting from iGoogle and love that all the premium podcasts are available. Thank you. Thank you." You're welcome. And Kim commented on the Genealogy Gems blog. She says, "I glanced at NetVibes this weekend, but knew that you would be addressing the issue. I loved your comment. This will be fun. You actually make it so easy for us to follow along, and yes, even make it fun. Appreciate the tutorial, and I'll be watching for more." And I think it should be fun, don't you? I mean, I know I sometimes technology is not. It can be aggravating. But I do think it's kind of fun to kind of get in there and make it your own. Well, if you've been trying to get your genealogy vibe on by converting from iGoogle to NetVibes, but you're having a little bit of trouble, and I've heard from a couple of you, rest assured, that process does work. I know maybe it didn't work the first couple times you tried. However, there are a few things I want to remind you about to kind of make sure this works. First of all, this only converts your iGoogle tabs and your RSS gadgets, such as gadgets that you have for following blogs and podcasts. Those are delivered on RSS feeds. It can't convert gadgets that have been made specifically for iGoogle because they are coded for iGoogle. Okay, so they're not going to talk to NetVibes properly. However, don't worry because there's lots of great NetVibes gadgets that can do many of the things, so you can replace them. Also, in this conversion, it is absolutely, and I can't stress this enough, mandatory that you follow the directions exactly. It doesn't work otherwise. So, for example, while it might seem like it would be easier to just drag your mouse over the code to highlight it for copying, rather than right-clicking and using Select All, which is what I write out in the instructions, don't do it. Resist the temptation, because I found that it absolutely can make a difference, and it can make it not work. I don't know what it is. I'm not a programmer. I just play one on TV. So that's why I really tried to carefully write out those instructions in the show notes, because as I was going through it myself and testing it, I found that any deviation made it not work. And that's also why I put the video for you together. So hopefully it makes it a little easier that you can watch me do it step by step. And I know that it also may seem like you're doing too many extra steps, copying and creating an XML document just to turn around, convert it, and then copy it again as a text document. But trust me, every single step, as I described it, is critical to the conversion working properly. So if you are having trouble, I'm sorry, I don't want to be frustrating for you, and I would recommend printing out the instructions from the show notes page, and then you can just have them right there in front of you. Go through them step by step, check them off as you go so that you don't miss anything. But please, if it gets frustrating, I don't want you to be frustrated. Just know that you don't have to convert iGoogle. I don't want you to get bogged down with the conversion and pull your hair out and feel like it's not worth doing. Simply let it go. Start new with NetVibes with their dashboard, and then you can add the feeds manually by using copy and paste. You can open up the gadget on iGoogle, copy it, paste that RSS feed into the NetVibes gadget, and you'll be okay to go. It will take a little longer to make that transition, but it's not that bad. And it's going to save you from further headache. I don't want you to be frustrated with it. And stay tuned, because I'm going to be doing additional videos showing you, for those of you who don't already have an iGoogle page, how to start one brand new and on NetVibes from scratch, and then also how to really jazz it up for all of you, which is really going to be fun. So stay tuned. Those are coming soon. Now, I just want to answer a couple of specific questions that listeners had that they sent me in about this, and maybe it'll help out the rest of you. Don mentioned that the command bar wasn't visible in Internet Explorer, and he's absolutely right. For some people, their command bar won't be turned on, so they won't be able to see it. And that could cause a little bit of confusion when you go to follow the conversion instructions. So if you go to your toolbar and you don't see the page menu that I'm talking about, you'll need to turn your command bar on. And the command bar is the top part of the Internet Explorer browser, the one that shows page as a menu option. That's what you're going to need. So if you don't have it, just right-click anywhere there at the top of the browser where you see some blank space. You don't want to click on another button. Just wherever you see on mine, it's light blue. Right-click on that. That's going to open up a little pop-up menu, and that will give you the option to checkmark command. And that puts the command bar on your browser. Then you will be able to see the page menu. I hope that helps. And Leroy wrote, I watched your podcast on NetVibes. Nice solution to the loss of iGoogle. Want to know if NetVibes runs on both Mac OS and Windows platforms. Thanks in advance for your assistance. Well, like iGoogle, NetVibes is on the cloud. All of the page that you're working on actually resides on the NetVibes servers and website. So this means it can be accessed by any computer, regardless of the operating system. Doesn't matter if you're on a Mac or a PC. And it also means that you can access your homepage from any computer, no matter where you are, with your username and your password. So that's the beauty of it, isn't it? Which makes it very flexible and very portable, which is what I love about it. And it doesn't clog up your hard drive, right? And Julie from Arizona wrote to say, been trying to sign up for the basic account. She's talking about NetVibes, and I can't get past the sign up page. Every username imaginable seems to be already in use. I just keep getting the same message. Any suggestions? Okay, so the thing is that NetVibes has been around about as long as iGoogle, which means that it's actually kind of a long time in technological terms. A lot of people have gone through and used the system, and they've used up these usernames. I noticed the same thing. When you go to Google and you try to get a new username, typically you don't get the first one you look for. So what I would recommend is to just get a little more unusual with the name that you're choosing. So here's one idea, and this works really well for passwords as well. It's to create a username that stands for a sentence. So if you think of the first letter of each word in your sentence becomes your password. So if your sentence is, I am migrating to NetVibes from iGoogle, your password is IAMTN like Nancy, F like Frank, I, right? The first letter of each word. I don't think anybody's going to have that. Now, don't all of you use it at once, or they all will, but that's the idea. Come up with a sentence that's easy for you to remember, and then grab the first letter of each word in your sentence. All right? And Kay, she writes in and says, I listened to the most recent episode, number 136, and I was so excited. First of all, it's terrific news about the premium service and the access to all the podcasts. This has always been very frustrating to me. I listen while I walk, and then most of the time I would forget to save the podcasts on my hard drive before they were gone forever. Absolutely. Got it. I heard you guys, and that's one of the things we wanted to fix. And Kay says, so glad to hear that there's a solution to iGoogle, but the transfer isn't working. When I attempt to convert the source file from my iGoogle page to the OPML format, I get one of two results. Either nothing, because the file says it's too big, or I get an OPML file that's only about 8 lines long. And this is a file that will not import into NetVibes dashboard. I just get 0 files imported. And she says, now understand, I have my own web page, some of it from my Genie program, but also some I had coded and designed myself. I often alter the source codes on the pages that Roots Magic generates for the web. I understand this whole process very well, and I have tried it a couple of other ways, but I always get the same results. I'm thinking my iGoogle page just has too much content, or maybe I need to revert to the old look, pick a little different background or theme or something. Well, I heard from a couple of you that you got this error message that Kay is talking about, and that it was saying that your iGoogle code was too big to convert. And you told me you have pretty big iGoogle pages. Now, I have a pretty big iGoogle page. I've got 12 tabs full of gadgets, and I just went through the instructions again, and it did convert. I don't know what the problem is. So I don't know why that happens, and I can't seem to replicate the problem myself. So here's what I would suggest. The best thing I can think of is make a list of the gadgets that are unique to iGoogle. Not the RSS gadgets, but just the ones that you got off of the iGoogle gallery. And then make that list, delete those off of iGoogle before going through the conversion process. And that should make the overall file from iGoogle much smaller. And then you'll have a list of the kinds of gadgets that you want to go into NetVibes and find replacements for. Now, as for the 0 files result, I did get that one, and I got it when I just slightly deviated from the instructions. So the example I gave you, just highlighting all the code and copying it, rather than right-clicking on it, doing select all, and then copying it. I don't know why, but that little deviation caused me, when I went through the process, to get into NetVibes, and I got 0 files. So the long and short of it is that you might be doing a little shortcut because you do know programming. You know HTML, you know some of the basic things, and whatever that little shortcut is you might be doing, that might be causing it. So that's the best I can offer. And as I said before, I wouldn't sweat it. It's not converting the whole 9 yards anyway. So this was just a way to give you kind of a quick jump start. If not, let it go. Go and just start building those gadgets yourself and copying and pasting your RSS feeds. And we gave it our best shot, but at least you only have to do it once. That's the good news, right? And heck, since we are doing lots of updates in this episode, let's give you an answer to a question that came in about the free Genealogy Gems toolbar. Now, a lot of you folks have been downloading the free toolbar, and Janice wrote me to ask about how to tweak it just a bit. She says, I just recently installed the Genealogy Gems toolbar, and I really would like to keep it, but after installing the bar, it set my home page to Bing. And I had my default set to Google, but have not been able to reset it. Can you help me? Thanks. Well, the answer is that the toolbar will set Bing as your home page. That happens in the setup process when you're first downloading it. And unfortunately, that is something that is dictated by the company that develops and manages the toolbar. So unfortunately, I don't have any control over it. I don't like it either, frankly. However, you can certainly opt out of the Bing option when you install the toolbar. That's one solution. The other thing is, if you've already installed the toolbar, you can certainly reset your home page on your browser. And Janice is talking about the page that comes up when you click the little house button on your browser. That's your home page. So, for example, if you're in Firefox, if you use Firefox as a web browser, you can change it back to Google by going up to the menu and make sure that your menu bar is on and visible. That's important. And clicking Tools, and then select Options, select the General tab in the pop-up window, and then paste, http://www.google.com in the home page field and click OK. And that's going to reset your home button on the Firefox browser back to Google. And I'll have those step-by-step for you in the show notes. And if you use Internet Explorer, all you have to do is just click the little arrow next to the house button and just follow the little menu prompts to reset it. You'll want to start by being on google.com and then click that little arrow button next to the button, follow the prompts, click the little radial button to select that you want this page that you're on to be your home page, and that'll take care of it. And John asked about another feature. He writes, I recently installed your toolbar on my Internet Explorer 9 browser, and I found this to be a very useful tool. However, I noticed a few things changed after adding the toolbar. When I add a new tab in my browser, it defaults to what I believe to be a Bing search page with your logo on it. I miss my old new tab page where I could just click on several of my most used websites. I'm not even sure what the default was prior to adding the toolbar. Well, when you install the toolbar, it does set your page that you get when you click for a new tab on your browser. It sets it to a search page, and it adds the logo just to let you know that that's being done from the toolbar. I think their idea is that it's just convenient because most people are going on the web and searching. But you don't have to have that. So if you don't want a search page on your new tab, it's super easy to change. You can change it back to the default page, and that's the one that you mentioned. It shows you those most recent websites that you've been to so that you can just click one of them and go right to it when you open a new tab. So simply click the wrench icon. It's on your toolbar menu. Click Additional Settings and uncheck the box that says Show a Search Box for New Tabs. And that'll take care of it. In fact, I did the same thing because I really like that most recent, because I keep going to the same websites all the time, right? So it's really convenient to have that. But if you find yourself needing to search, you could leave it on search either way. Okay, well, thanks to all of you who have installed the free Genealogy Gems toolbar. Hope you've enjoyed it. It's easy to get. If you go to genealogygems.com, you'll find a picture of it there, a little image that you can click, and it will send you to the download page. If you use other than Internet Explorer, you might scroll down a little bit and you'll see icons for the various browsers that people use, and you could click to download it using the particular browser that you use. That should help. And watch those prompts as you're installing it, because you can unselect any of the options that we've been talking about when you do install the toolbar. Okay, well, since we've already taken a couple of listener emails and questions and gotten you some answers, I think we should jump right into our culinary family history. And we will do that coming up right after this with my conversation with Gena Philibert Ortega. It's here, the new version 5 of the award-winning Roots Magic genealogy software. It makes researching, organizing, and sharing your family history easier and more enjoyable than ever. If you're looking to take the next step in your family history research and start recording your family tree in your own genealogy database, or if you've really been wanting to make a switch to a much more user-friendly program, then do what I did. I chose Roots Magic, and I'm really glad that I did. Throughout its 10-year history, Roots Magic has helped people research and share their family trees with innovative features like moving people from one file to another with your mouse, a source wizard to help you document your work, creating a shareable CD to give to family and friends, and running Roots Magic off of a USB flash drive when you're away from home. Roots Magic also received the award for easiest to sync from Family Search for their work in interfacing with that system. Really, what are you waiting for? Download your risk-free trial of Roots Magic 5 at rootsmagic.com. See why professionals and beginners alike choose Roots Magic at rootsmagic.com. You've probably seen Gena Philibert Ortega's name around the internet. She has in the past worked as kind of the host on Genealogy Wise, the website. She has written articles for Family Tree Magazine. And most recently, she has written a book for Family Tree Magazine. And it's called From the Family Kitchen: Discover Your Food Heritage and Preserve Favorite Recipes. Well, I ran into Gena, which our paths cross quite often at various genealogy conferences. I think I saw her last at NGS and then at the Southern California Genealogical Society Jamboree in June. And we got to talking and said, we need to have a conversation about this book on the podcast. And then we discovered her brother lives right around the corner from me here in Northern California. Now, Gena is in Southern California, but I mean, literally, he's maybe a quarter mile from my house. So we looked at our schedules, and she was coming up over the 4th of July holiday, and we thought, this is it. Let's do it in person. So I invited her over to the Cook compound and come hang out in my family room and kitchen. Seems like an appropriate place to be talking about family and food and family history. So here's my conversation with Gena Philibert Ortega. They say you are what you eat, and my guess is that means our ancestors were what they ate too. And to help us learn more about that, I've invited Gena Philibert Ortega. She is the author From the Family Kitchen. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
I'm trying to remember. Have you been on the show before?
You interviewed me a few years ago at a Family History Expo.
That's what I thought. And see, gosh, 5 years, you'd think it'd be 500 years. I can't remember anything. But we see each other so much. I don't know when the microphone's running and when it's not.
That's right. Exactly.
I had so much fun going through your book.
Oh,
and of course,
thank you.
We're here at my house, I should say.
That's right.
So we're in the family room kitchen area. You're going to hear my dog, Maggie, growling. I've got 2 more in the backyard who are probably going to make make noise, but you know what? That's what the family kitchen's all about, isn't it?
It is, and it's so great to be in your kitchen because you've got all these quilts and this old china, and I just love it. So this is a great place to be.
Yeah, surrounded by many things that came to me through ancestors.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Grandmas and people who were very generous. And we're going to talk about some of that. I have my whole list of questions.
Okay, great.
I went through the book and just thought it was so... I thought it was so enlightening that you really touched on something that I'm very passionate about myself, which, of course, is researching our female ancestors.
Yes.
And I was looking at this. I said, in Chapter 1, you talk about celebrating your female ancestors. And it really got me to thinking about how, as genealogists, we have our classic list of records. We've got vital records and census records and all that kind of stuff. And we kind of give that the high respect.
We do.
And then I get to thinking, why isn't a recipe card in there? Yeah. Because if you think about it, and I know you talk about this in the book, that recipe card is in our ancestors' handwriting. Yeah. She is, it is one of the few female records typically.
That's right.
She's going to be talking about how she fed her family on a daily basis, probably what they could afford to purchase. That's what the recipe is going to be geared toward. There's so much information.
Tell us. Well, I think as genealogists, we do stress those government documents because they list a lot of people and a lot of information, in a quick and easy way to find. And so we have, especially now, become accustomed to that. But unfortunately, those records don't always tell us the story of women's lives. And so, I'm not saying get rid of the census and the vital records and the tax records.
Oh boy, we're going to get email if we say
That's
that.
right.
But of course, we're not saying that.
And I use it all the time too.
Right.
But what I am saying is, if we want to look at women's lives, why aren't we looking at things that women left behind? And one, like you said, is recipes that are handed down. Others are community cookbooks, signature quilts, journals and diaries. Why aren't we using those to find women's lives?
And putting them, to me, why aren't we putting them in the same revered category? Because just because they're not issued by the church or the government doesn't mean they're any less more vital. And in fact, so many times they're primary in the sense that they were written right then, at that time, in their hand.
That's right. And they tell us so much about their lives. A recipe card isn't going to give you the birthday, but it gives you sometimes ethnic origins. It might even give you religious origins, because in some religions there's certain dietary restrictions. It just tells you so much. Plus, like you said, it's in her handwriting. And to me, genealogy is, or should be, so much more than just gathering dates and places. And that's all nice and good. But it's when you can recreate their lives that makes it more interesting to people. And so I really want people to get to know their female ancestors. And I think by looking at some of the home sources that might be available to you, that's one really good step in trying to find that.
Absolutely. In fact, here, you hold the microphone.
Okay.
I am reaching over here to get the cookbook that my grandmother I received through my mother.
Okay,
and this
great.
is my maternal grandmother's cookbook. You know what was so fun about this, Gena? Was that here's all her recipes, all her handwritten notes, where she got the book originally.
Wow.
But there is a pile of, and this is in my genealogy, diets. These are all the diets she went on.
Sure.
Since the 20s, I think.
Yeah.
And I think, wow, that is so funny. I remember my mom being on chronic diets. I'm on chronic diets. And it's so funny to see the struggle she was having personally, and yet her favorite recipes, the ones that are most marked up, are, of course, divinity and candy.
Yes. Yeah, not really diet food.
It's really, when you receive a book like this, I'd love for you to talk about what does a person do. You don't just dismantle this thing and take it out of order.
No. One of the great things about something like this, and that's the cookbooks I really love, the ones that people have put their, newspaper clippings and their notes, and, my favorites are the community cookbooks where the woman has written, this is really good, or this isn't so good, or she's marked up, what the measurements should be, or I have one where the woman went in and she put in who who was whose daughter in town.
Oh, wonderful.
So it is a genealogy.
Right there.
So, in a case like this, of course, all those newspaper clippings and stuff do cause damage to the actual book because of the acidity of the paper. But one of the things that I know I personally do is I go in and I scan all the loose documents in there. Mm-hmm. I mean, my feeling is it's kind of, the book is falling apart anyway, so I just kind of leave it. But I scan all of these, and then that way I have that I can then share if I want to, or blog about, or give to someone. And that means so much since only one of us can have the book.
Right. And don't you find it's important to maintain the order in which you find things?
Sure, because in yours it's date order. Yeah, definitely, because it's in date order. And you can also, when you're scanning, you can annotate stuff, and so you know that that's what happens. The other thing that I have done is I noticed on your book that there's a signature in the front. Mm-hmm. And so I took a picture. I have a cookbook from my great-grandmother, and I took a picture of that front so I could remember how she signed her name and, that was her book. And that way I can share those pictures with family members as well. Mm-hmm. So.
And you were talking about the community cookbook?
Yes.
Now, here's one that I thought, this is called 340 home-tested recipes.
Yes, they're all tested in community cookbooks.
Of course, they are. And, of course, the calories aren't there.
No.
So that's why we kept going back into our diets.
That's right.
You know where this came from? I was giving a presentation in Pleasanton.
Oh, okay.
And just 10 minutes from my house. And I was talking about some ancestors from Winthrop, Minnesota, which is a tiny little town in southern Minnesota. And at the end of the presentation, a woman came up to me, and she said, you said you have Larson's? And I said, yes. And she says, I have. Somebody gave me years ago a little Winthrop, Minnesota community cookbook.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there's a Larson in there. Now, I had told her, I said, there is a recipe for sour cream cookies that my husband's been asking about since the day we married. I have tried every one that I've come across, and none of them are just right. And anyway, she says, well, let me get your address, and I'll send you this book. So here's the First Lutheran Church, Winthrop, Minnesota, from the Ladies' Aid.
Yes, of course. Yes.
And I went through here, and I found the Larsons. Now, no Larson has a sour cream cookie recipe.
Oh, that's too bad.
However, her neighbor did.
And that's where she got it, obviously.
And that's where she got it.
Yes.
And my husband just about went crazy when he went, oh my gosh, this is great-grandmother's sour cream cookies. And it came to me through somebody in a presentation, a Genealogy Society meeting, 2,000-3,000 miles away?
Yeah.
Isn't that just amazing?
It is.
How do people go about? We don't always have these in our own home from our own ancestors and our moms.
No, we don't, definitely. Right now, because historically community cookbooks have not been seen as something worthy of archiving, unfortunately, for libraries and stuff. They're difficult in the first place because they've got the later ones have these comb bindings.
Right.
And so it makes it difficult to store and so forth. And these women's endeavors just didn't seem that important. However, there are places that do archive them, a few. And sometimes in a local public library, they will have the ones for the local groups.
Right.
So that's another way to get them. That's one of the reasons I do the blog Food Family Ephemera is I find these and I post a recipe and sometimes I post a recipe that's kind of funny, but like for squirrel or something. But the purpose is
there's the dog. All right. Sorry about that.
That's okay. The purpose is to get this knowledge out there. And one of the things that I recommend is I just tell people that I collect community cookbooks, and I actually, like you, have people who send them to me. Mm-hmm. So it can be difficult, but if you start with, message boards and the local library and the few collections that exist, and I have a list on my blog, you can start to see if you can find some of these. But they are so important.
They are. And, another great resource, eBay.
eBay,
right?
exactly.
I mean,
yes,
you just put out
and that's where I get
eBay
mine.
alert.
That's right.
Saying, here's the name of the town or the person or the year
that's
or
right.
the church. And it's amazing. It might take a couple of months. but one of them will pop up.
It might. And you know, what I do is I also just do a general search for community cookbook, church cookbook. If I know the ancestor was in a certain type of group, like the Grange, I'll put in Grange cookbook. And so that's another way to search. But like you said, alerts are so fabulous. And so that can help you too. And the other thing that I think is important to know is, I mean, that's what, from the 1930s or 1920s?
Yeah, 30s, I think.
These cookbooks started during the Civil War. And so anywhere from about 1864, 1865 on, you know, if you have any female ancestors in that time period, they could have contributed to something. And it wouldn't just have been for a church. It could have been for a school or a hospital or an auxiliary that they belonged to. So, I mean, really, it's just endless what you can find.
Exactly. Well, so much here to talk about. We talked about a bit about our female ancestors, what it tells us about them. You do the big overview in the book in terms of history, and then you get into some real specifics.
Yeah.
The one, of course, that caught my eye was Jell-O.
Jell-O, I love Jell-O.
And I was so surprised that you told us how old Jell-O was.
Yeah,
tell us the history.
Yeah, Jell-O is not something, you know, we tend to think of it as something from the 50s when women made these kind of bizarre Jell-O salads, and I kind of talk about that, but actually the history is from the early 1900s and so forth. So, and there's been gelatin prior to that. They actually used to sell it. It was in little sheets, and then you would soak it and, you know, and
back
make
in the
gelatin
1800s,
in the
right?
1800s.
Yeah.
So Victorians liked Jell-O. It just wasn't Jell-O, and they would make little Jell-O-like squares, and they're beautiful. But it would take a lot of work, and so obviously the Jell-O that we know in the powder form is a lot easier and really revolutionized things. And then it came in different flavors, which is delightful.
And I remember my grandmother putting vegetables. And now my mom always did fruit. She wasn't so big on the vegetables, but vegetables, I mean, there are all kinds of really chopped up food. And then, of course, the thing was you had to mold it.
Yes, and actually Jell-O during a certain time period came in vegetable flavors, so imagine that.
Oh, wow.
In fact, I was reading a blog the other day that's hilarious, and she makes these different Jell-O molds. I mean, there was everything from, you know, putting pimento olives in it. Mm-hmm. I bought a cookbook the other day at the antique store, and it was a Jell-O recipe for chicken mousse. I wouldn't really want to try that, though. I mean, one was for tuna and avocado.
Wow.
I mean, you figure that people who are manufacturing an item want to show how all these ways you can use it, and to our palates today, that's not a really good idea. And I'm not so convinced that a lot of people ate tuna avocado Jell-O, but maybe.
A little scientific experiment in the kitchen.
Yeah, it shows you that, you know, we think that food is not so different, but it actually is. Even the food my mother ate is so much different than what we eat today.
Yeah.
Or even the food we ate when I was young.
Now, of course, a lot of that was dictated by how food was dealt with over time. And you do have a chapter where you're talking about from salting to refrigeration, and really the role that war played in food and the impact it had. Talk about that.
Yeah, you know, I don't know if one of the really amazing parts in the book for me was about salt.
Yeah.
And the role the Civil War played. And I never realized that really the way that the North, one of the big reasons they won the Civil War is because they starved the South to death. And not only were the soldiers starving, but the civilians were starving, because not only did they blockade everything, but at that time they weren't manufacturing salt in the South. And salt was an important, I mean, you know, now we try to stay away from salt, but people in other generations ate so much more salt than we do today because they used it to preserve foods.
Right.
And at that time they were preserving a lot of hogs. And I mean, salt became so scarce that the rooms that they were salting meat in, they were taking up the flooring and soaking it in water and boiling it so they could get the salt, the residue salt, off that wood to use. And in fact, people would have weddings and they would give them little packets of salt as a gift. I mean, it was so precious, and it got to a point where they just did not have any. And they had the way to manufacture it because they had, you know, oceans and that kind of thing that you can, but they just weren't doing it at that time. And so these little things that we really take for granted, I mean, I don't know about you, you buy that thing of salt and it seems to last you 100 years.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't really concern us as much today. But back then, you were limited by transportation and preservation methods. You were limited by what diet, if you had an immigrant community and what they were used to and what they ate, and then, what people raised and hunted. And so, what was fun is when we were at NGS, a lot of people came up to me to talk about their food history, which was a lot of fun. And NGS was in Cincinnati, and so I had a lot of people, because we were right there by the Kentucky border, tell me that they ate possum and squirrel and raccoon and foods like that. Now, as California girls, that's foreign,
no,
right?
That doesn't happen.
That's
but
not
I noticed the recipes in the book. I mean, but I do have Oklahoma relatives now. So there was a little bit more of a homespun nature to the cooking.
Yes, but it really shows you that depending on war or region or immigrant population, food changes a lot. And just traveling, you can notice some of that. Not so much anymore. With Food Network and all this stuff, it kind of...
Restaurant chains.
We don't have it as much, but we still have it a little bit.
Well, in Cincinnati, I remember Alice and Dolan from Family Trade Magazine took some of us out. We went out for Cincinnati chili.
I had that too.
Wow. And I think that was the first time I'd ever had Tabasco sauce. Now, I don't know. I know they have Tabasco sauce out here, but...
Yeah, we have it.
It was chili with cheese on top and then... and it was really good. And I thought, I can't believe I'm eating this.
But it was different than what you and I are used to.
Very different chili. And it was on spaghetti.
It was on spaghetti, which was interesting. But the flavors, they put different things in it than what we're accustomed to, because we have chili that's more of a Mexican, Spanish kind of, Tex-Mex kind of thing. But yeah, that's a really good example. And I can tell you other conferences I've gone to where we've gone out and tried the local specialty. But, in our ancestors' day, that was much more profound than it is today. But
I imagine so. Oh, yeah. Let's see. We talked about war. I noticed as I was getting into the middle of the book, and I was thinking about Martha Stewart, and you were talking about Betty Crocker.
Yes.
So before there was Martha, there was Betty. And tell the audience, if they don't already know, was she a real person or not?
She was not a real person. She was kind of like the Pillsbury Doughboy or some of those other people, really.
Persona.
She was a persona, and a few different women played her on the radio mostly. And and also answering letters, because she got lots. In fact, at one point, she was the most popular woman in the United States, and she was not a real person.
That's amazing. Although I have to say, I think that one of the questions that you had in your interview questions was, what was the first cookbook that you had? And mine was, I got the red Betty Crocker cookbook and the red and white gingham Better Homes and Gardens, and inherited those from my mom. Those were my first real officials.
And for a few generations, that is the first cookbook. I actually have a Betty Crocker cookbook from my grandmother. So definitely, she was an important force in the United States, because she, at a time where women were transitioning from stoves that you had to put wood in and coal and that kind of stuff into electricity and gas, women, they went from really knowing how to do this kind of cooking to, okay, now we have to dial in the temperature and that kind of thing. So she is the one who helped women know how to do kind of scientific cooking, which was more measurement oriented and more temperature oriented and much more so than their grandmothers had done.
Because many of those older recipes would talk about what the ingredients were, but didn't even mention the amounts.
No.
Or they would just say, well, part of this and part of that.
That's right. And in fact, sometimes they'd leave stuff out. And so really women got to the point where they had to know the specifics, and they didn't come, they weren't taught from their mothers especially when there was new stoves and all of that. The other thing that Betty Crocker did was there were mixes now. And so what was funny is, in the research I did, I read a book about Betty Crocker, and they were saying that, they had these mixes that basically you could add water to, but housewives did not like that because it made them feel like they weren't doing anything. Yeah. So then that's why we have to add an egg to mixes today, is because that meant they felt more engaged and that they were actually doing
They actually cooked something.
They cooked something. So yeah, she, and she definitely was the Martha Stewart of her time. She had radio shows. I believe she was on TV for a little bit. She answered questions. And
it was really a company. It was a company, in a sense, behind her answering the questions.
Exactly.
And it was a marketing campaign.
Oh, yeah. It was definitely marketing because it all had to do with the mixes she was selling.
Of course, I suppose that's probably the same true for Martha Stewart.
It is. But yeah, that really was the first one. And we don't rely on Betty Crocker as much. And she probably does seem like someone on a mix to us. Yeah. But, in those days, she was a person that women relied on.
And helping her make that transition. Can you imagine the day when the women could finally throw their clothes in the washing machine, could put some water and egg in a mix,
yes,
and go sit down and read. Right. For the first time having leisure time.
Oh.
It revolutionized our lives.
It did. But it made things easier, but when you think about it, if you had that new electric stove or gas stove, that was a total new way of dealing with things. And so it really is one of those, right after World War II is when women especially started using more shortcuts in cooking. And you just think about how much that must have helped. I mean, they went from really being tied to the house to, during World War II, being asked to work while the men were away. And then when the men came back, they were like, well, I don't feel like being tied to the house so much anymore. Yeah. So,
and that brings me to something else that you talk about in the book, and which you see in so many older books. The first section is about table setting. I got to thinking about, as you were talking about table settings in the book, what a lost art that was, and really how cooking and homemaking was the arts. It was an art. And I remember being taught how to set a table, and although I taught my children, of course, table setting is just not done as much as it used to be, and so I find myself still fussing about which side the knife is on, and that kind of thing, because that's the way you do it. But they're like, what are you stressing about that for? It's a very different mindset today. It's sad, I think, a little bit in a way.
It's sad, but the same could be true of our Victorian ancestors, because they had all kinds of little silverware and dishes and salt dishes and all kinds of things that we don't have today. And so obviously with time, technology, and busy, most of us don't have time to set the table. I know I usually stack some dishes and everybody grabs and goes.
Well, I imagine in the 30s and 40s, in a way, what looks formal to us was simplified compared to Victorian times.
Yeah, and a lot of cookbooks prior to now, really not only taught you how to set the table, but they taught you other things as well, like substitution of ingredients is one. Older cookbooks have things like how to get spots out of clothes, which probably would be good now, and even what to feed people who are sick.
Yeah.
And so cookbooks weren't just cookbooks. They were actually household manuals, and that is fairly lost on our cookbooks today. You see some of that in community cookbooks still, but for the most part, cookbooks are cookbooks now, whereas before they were much, much more than that.
Although I do think that is something that Martha brought back in, was that infusing them together again as homemaking, as a living style. And talk a little bit about Google Books, because Google Books is still a wonderful resource that you can surf right from your own computer and see what things looked like 100, 150 years ago.
You can, and I'm always amazed when people don't use Google Books.
I know.
Isn't that just, I'll tell you, I use it in a lot of different ways, but one way is by looking at cookbooks, because anything prior to 1923 that's in the public domain is full preview there on Google Books. And on Google Books, you can download it, you can have it on your smartphone. There's the My Library feature that I love, that you just have to sign in.
You can clip little portions.
You can do so much. And so really when I'm doing research, I put in the place that my ancestor was from, and then you could use a term like cookbook and see what comes up. And that really helps me to recreate their community when I see other things that have to do with their time period, and their place. So I actually use Google Books and Internet Archive.
Yeah.
Internet Archive actually has a section for cooking. And so if you go to Internet Archive and you go to the texts and then you do additional collections, it has a cooking section, and they're all old cookbooks.
Fabulous.
And so I use that. In fact, I use a lot on the blog as well. And you can find wonderful things. I mean, I found cookbooks from churches where the church cemetery is in the cookbook, and it lists everybody who's buried there. I mean, so cookbooks were much more.
Well, and
than
food
what
has always been mixed in with death, hasn't it?
Right, that's right. So, and that's one way.
Oh, Gena and I had so much fun getting together and talking about one of our favorite subjects, food, and the role that it plays in our family history, and in particular, the role that it plays in the female ancestors in our family tree. I hope you really enjoyed that. If you would like a copy of Gena's book, From the Family Kitchen, Discover Your Food Heritage and Preserve Favorite Recipes, I hope that you will order it through our website. That's one of those ways that you can help financially support the free Genealogy Gems podcast, and it doesn't cost you a dime. Plus, it helps us keep the free show coming to you. Just head to genealogygems.com, hover your mouse over podcast in the menu, and select podcast episodes. Navigate your way to this episode, number 137. And there in the show notes, you'll see a picture of the book. And when you click it, it'll take you to the store where you can order your copy. I always appreciate it when you do that through the website. Thank you so much. And I think that you're really going to enjoy it. It certainly has me motivated to continue preserving not only my grandmother's and my mother's recipes, but my recipes. I want to do that as well. Now, one of the fun things we also got to do since we met in person was we videotaped our conversation. So stay tuned, because my goal is to publish at least an excerpt of that video interview on the Genealogy Gems YouTube channel at youtube.com/genealogygems. But also, if you are an app user, if you have the Genealogy Gems podcast app, check the bonus content for this episode, because you will find a very special video there as well. And stay tuned to the podcast, because we're not done. I have part 2 of my conversation with Gena coming up in the next episode. Thanks so much for joining me today for Genealogy Gems podcast episode number 137. Again, for information about everything we talked about here on the show today, head to the show notes, go to genealogygems.com, and in the menu, select podcast episodes. You're looking for episode 137. And if you have any questions or comments, you can leave me a voicemail at 925-272-4021. I might play that here on the show. And you can always email me at genealogygemspodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, friend. I'll talk to you soon.